Hi, everybody who's gathered at the church there in Golden. Nice to think of you there. I'm sorry I can't join you tonight. I help serve Golden as the minister, but I have Christmas Eve services down here in the Windermere Valley. And so recording this a couple days in advance, you can see that it's still daytime. There's a couple of messages I'd like to share with you tonight. The first one is kind of a story, and often when I tell a story, I have a helper. So let me see if a helper is going to show up tonight.
Oh, is it my time? It's my time to come in?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Good to see you.
I'm not your normal helper, I know.
I know, but you've been here before. And,
yeah, I sure have.
What's your name again?
Charlie.
Charlie the
Charlie the donkey.
Charlie, tell me why you're standing.
Well, you wouldn't believe it, but bears aren't used to this cold weather. And Benny had something else really. They said that they were busy, but I think it's the cold weather.
And you look really well insulated.
I'm used to being outside, winter, summer, and I love coming to see you.
Oh, thank you, Charlie.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Charlie, tonight I want to talk about how whenever we read a story, like a children's story or even an adult story, always, can I say, there is challenge and difficulty that the heroes or heroines face. So when I think of like the story, have you heard the story of the three little pigs?
I've been on a farm with pigs.
Well, there's a children's story called of the three little pigs, and the challenge that they run into is the big bad wolf.
Ooh, that's a challenge.
He wants to huff and puff and blow the houses down. Have you ever heard the story of Cinderella?
Did she wear a red cape and then this wolf came along?
That was Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh, that was a challenge.
That was tough on wolves.
Yeah.
All the stories are tough on wolves.
Yeah. So did Cinderella beat a wolf?
No, she had stepsisters.
Oh, that can happen.
Yeah. So tonight we're remembering the birth.
I tripped on a step once, so they are steps are a problem.
Yeah, that's part of the challenge. Tonight we're looking at the birth stories of Jesus. There's two of them in the Bible. There's one in the Gospel of Matthew, one in the Gospel of Luke. And in both of the birth stories of Jesus, there are challenges that Mary and Joseph have to face. Like in the story from Luke, the Emperor Augustus, he wants to count everybody so that he can tax everybody. And back then, people were poor, and being taxed by the wealthy, that wasn't good. And so in the story, he's making everybody go back to the town in which their ancestors came from. So Joseph his ancestors came from Bethlehem. So it's like Mary and Joseph have to walk all the way from Nazareth, where they live, down to Bethlehem.
Wow.
Do you know how far that is?
No, not at all.
I looked it up. It's 144 kilometers.
Woohoo! Well, heck, I think it's 139 from Fairmont to Golden, so it's about the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they had to walk in the story the same distance from Fairmont to Golden.
Wow.
It's a long walk.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we think that they maybe had the help of a donkey. Yeah.
I like that when they say that.
I know. It's not in the Bible.
I would have done it if I were there.
That's right. And then when they got to Bethlehem, there was no room in the inn.
Right.
That was a challenge.
Right.
And so it says that
they found room in the out.
Well, yeah, it talks about there was no room in the inn. So we had the innkeeper, but it also says that the shepherds came and found the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger. So we think a manger, because you know what a manger is.
Yeah, sure do.
Yeah, that's where
a feeding trough.
Animals eat out of it. Right. So we think if there's a manger, there must be animals. If there's animals, maybe it was a stable. But in Matthew's story, there's challenge because the wise men, Matthew talks about the wise men, and they see a star and they follow the star. The wise men are coming from the east, so the star must be in the west, and they're following the star. And then the star disappears. So they don't know where to go. So they go into Jerusalem, and then they ask around, and they end up asking wicked King Herod. And Herod is not a kind man. He's not a nice guy. And he's very afraid of anybody who's going to challenge his power. So he lies to the wise men and says, you go find where this child born King of the Jews is going to be born, and come and tell me, and I'll come and worship him too. Yeah, he's lying. He wants to go and kill, and he's going to kill all the babies down in Bethlehem who are 2 years old and younger,
Yeah.
because he wants to kill any rival to his power.
Wow.
So the wise men go and they give gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Ooh.
But then it says that Joseph was warned in a dream not to go back to Nazareth, but to take Mary and Jesus down to Egypt until King Herod is gone.
Oh, good idea.
So, yeah. So you can see there's just challenges right in the story of the birth of Jesus. And then, of course, Jesus is challenged, more in his adult life.
Like all of us.
Like all of us.
Yeah.
Everybody is challenged.
Yeah.
And I think we're learning that there's a deeper purpose to life being challenging, so that we don't just live as superficial people. We find but we find
I am a bit superficial. I'm trying to figure out which is my better side. Sorry.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
And when we're challenged, we go deeper and we realize a deeper part of ourselves, which is like the part that connects to God. And it's like we join this thing that we're all connected and we're all united and we're all sort of rooted in a deeper place. And that's where we really find out that, like, who we are. It's like finding our God self.
Wow.
And Jesus said that that's what he found, and he abided in God, and he wanted us to abide in God. And that really changes the way we live life. So
lovely.
We often wouldn't go deeper if we weren't challenged. So
yeah,
that's the purpose of challenges.
That's great. Well, thanks for the message tonight. I'm sure the people in Golden, I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks so much for coming, Charlie. Okay. Nice to see you. Yeah. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye. So that's lovely. That's one message I want to share with you tonight. And there's another message, believe it or not. Back in 1860, so 1860 in the United States of America, there was an election, and Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th president of the United States. And the country was really ready to break apart. They were arguing over slavery and whether there was rights for new states for people to be able to have slaves or not. And so it was breaking the country apart. And after Abraham Lincoln was elected, 7 states left the Union. And so that was in November of 1860. And then so 3 months later, on March 4th, 1861, Abraham Lincoln needed to give his first inaugural address in Washington at Congress. And he tried to be so conciliatory. He wanted to bring people together. He wanted people to work together. And he tried to appeal to people's better natures. And so he ended his speech, and I just want to read the last couple of sentences. He ended his speech by saying, "We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature." And that the final few words, of course, have been remembered and repeated by other presidents and other people who are trying to bring people together and appeal to people's higher nature by the phrase, the better angels of our nature. It's a beautiful sort of poetic way of putting it, and it speaks to something that's really important. And I'd like to talk about it tonight just briefly, because I think Christmas does appeal to the better angels of our nature. And I think we know that. I think we know people are more likely to be giving and kind and nice and charitable, generous at Christmas time. And people hope to be good parents and good siblings and family members, and that their better self will come out at Christmas time. And of course, there is the beautiful true story that happened the first Christmas of World War I, so 1914. And already, like something like 1.5 million men had already died in a half a year of fighting in World War I. But it was Christmas Eve, and the British were in trenches, and near them, the Germans were in trenches, and they were close enough that they could hear each other. And so on Christmas Eve, a German soldier began singing Silent Night in German. And just imagine it, you know, the quietness and people listening. And after the first verse, the British soldiers joined in singing Silent Night. Of course, they were singing in English. But then other German soldiers joined in singing in German, and they sang the second and third verses. And when they had finished, there was silence. And then slowly they started to see people put white flags up and wave white flags. And then there were some brave soldiers that actually put their heads up over the trenches and stood up, which was, of course, super vulnerable. But soldiers did that on both sides, holding white flags. And then they started to come toward each other, and they brought things to share: cigarettes and brandy and food. And they began to visit, and they showed pictures of their family members and loved ones to each other. And they sang more, and they shared the food and the cigarettes and the drink. And then the next day, on Christmas Day, they continued to share, and they played soccer a lot on Christmas Day, and they continued to share food and drink and so on, and they continued to show pictures of loved ones back home. The better angels of their nature came forward, and that was so beautiful, because World War I ended up carrying on, and it was such a tragic loss. And in further years, because World War I lasted for 4 years, in the other Christmases, orders came down from higher up to the local commanding officers not to allow any more of this fraterization between the sides to take place. The better angels of people's nature isn't good for war. So it's a beautiful, true story of the better angels of human nature coming forward. I'd like to invite us to think of the times where we've witnessed, because it happens all the time, the better angels coming out of people. You know, at the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war, there was a scene on the news of some Ukrainian civilians feeding a Russian young man. He was a Russian soldier, but a young man who had got separated from his divisions, and they were feeding him and allowing him to use their cell phones to text back to loved ones back in Russia. And it was beautiful. It was the better angels of people coming forward. I just finished reading the novel, A State of Terror, written by Hillary Clinton and Louise Penny. And at the end of the book, in the acknowledgements, Louise Penny tells the story of how she first had contact from Hillary Clinton. It was in 2016, and the presidential election was on. And Louise Penny's husband died. He was a wonderful man, and they had a lovely marriage. And so she was grieving the loss of her husband. And it was meaningful for her to receive cards. And one day she received a card, and it would talk to, there was a fair bit of length of what her husband accomplished and did in this world, and just a acknowledgement of shared grief and sorrow. And it was from Hillary Clinton, who Louise Penny had never met. Hillary Clinton had never met Louise Penny and never met her husband, but enjoyed her as an author, enjoyed her books. And in the busyness of her presidential campaign, she wrote a bereavement letter to a woman she'd never met about a man she'd never met. And Louise Penny says how profoundly touched she was by this act of kindness and humanity, and wanted to be a better person herself from witnessing this beautiful act. it's the better angels of human nature coming forward. I think it's a sign of course, Christmas appeals to the better angels of our nature because Jesus appealed to the better angels of our nature. You know, I often like to repeat these lines, you know, when Jesus says to the poor peasant people back in his time, you are the light of the world, you are the salt of the earth, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You can love like God loves, and God loves like the sun that shines everywhere on everything. And God's love is like the rain that falls everywhere on everything. It does not discriminate. It is not exclusive. And Jesus says to love like that. And he told the people, blessed are you, the merciful, the meek, the pure in heart, the peacemakers. So we celebrate Christmas because we celebrate Jesus, because it does appeal to the better angels of our nature. And this is so important. It's so important for us as individuals because we want the better angels of our nature to come forward. It's a blessing to live from the better angels of our nature. But it's also really important in our world because that's what makes a better world. Yes, we can bring in legislature and laws. There can be rewards and punishments. You can incentivize things or you can punish people. But what really changes the world is by people living from the better angels of their nature. This ultimately is what will end war. This ultimately is what will help people listen to each other across echo chambers. This is how we're going to deal with big challenges like global warming. This is how we're going to deal with gun culture. And this is how 9 billion people are going to live together and share the planet. It's not just through passing laws, and it's not through just punishing people or incentivizing certain behavior. It's by people living from the better angels of our nature. That's what's always ultimately how the world becomes a better place. There's a lovely line in Romans that Paul writes. I'm going to paraphrase it a bit, but it says, all creation is groaning, waiting for humans to be the children of God. All creation is groaning, waiting for children. And can I just paraphrase it again? To realize the better angels of their nature. Because we will live differently on this planet with each other and with nature and creation. And creation's groaning. It was 2,000 years ago. It still is. So, simple message on Christmas Eve, the better angels of our nature. That's what Christmas appeals to. That's what Jesus appeals to. That's why we're here. It's in us. There's other words we can use, the better angels. Sometimes we talk about our true self, our deeper self, our I amness. I amness, our awakened self. There's different phrases we could use to live from our deeper self, our true self, our divine self, the better angels of our nature. And so let's do that. Let's awaken to that for our blessing and for the blessing of our world. Thank you, and Merry Christmas. Blessings on your Christmas gatherings and moments. And for some of you that I haven't met, I look forward to meeting you in person sometime. Bye for now.